Um, it's a delight to be here. I think these events are very important. One thing I discovered is great ideas don't spread by themselves quite often. And they need a little help. Case in point being the rest of the world would all have wonderful Japanese toilets if great ideas spread on their own. So I think these events are very important. I spend my days doing something that I'm really excited about. I help leaders and managers in mostly large organizations make better decisions, be more reflective, stay cool under pressure, and most importantly, be better at kind of influencing others and collaborating with others. And you can imagine I am fairly busy. There's plenty of work to do there. But one of the things I discovered about 5 years ago, which was very surprising to me, was I discovered that teaching people about their brain had a profound effect on their ability to understand themselves and understand others. Teaching people about the brain made them far more effective at whatever they wanted to achieve. And I was very surprised by that. It wasn't where I kind of expected I would end up. But for the last 5 years, I've been really passionate about kind of decoding, deciphering, translating the incredible neuroscience coming out and making it accessible to people. So those of you who are change agents in the room, and I dare say many of you here are change agents, I want to kind of let you in on a few secrets. I want to give you possibly some tools that will help you spread your ideas more effectively. Because what I've found is that learning about the brain does change everything. And I'm going to give you 4 reasons kind of how this happens. I've been thinking about this for some years now. There are 4 reasons why it's so useful to learn about the brain. The first one is this thing called the novelty effect. And this was my daughter at 18 months, and she had the wonderful experience at that time in her life of being at a TED conference all year round, because everything was kind of new and innovative and exciting. And when you're young, new things really impact your dopamine levels. You get very excited. When we're older, we don't see new things very often. But when you talk to leaders or teachers or government people or educators, anyone, from a brain perspective, you're giving them a novel perspective. Okay? And that novelty effect has quite an impact. It's kind of what Business Week focused on when they wrote about this field. They said it was kind of just a novelty effect. Actually, it's much more. But the novelty effect is very useful. It does get people's attention, and as I'll mention, attention does change the brain. So the novelty effect is powerful, but it is so much more than just a novelty effect. And I'll give you an example. If I tell you that the circuitry or network in the brain involved in kind of high-level strategic thinking, planning, decision-making, all of that, that network is very different to the network for understanding yourself and other people. If I tell you that those networks are inversely correlated, so when one is active, the other is deactive, you'll kind of get to see why people who spend their lives in their intellect often need a bit of work on the other side, because one circuit kind of becomes a bit, it kind of loses its connections there. So when I say that to you, it's kind of a new way of thinking about kind of why leaders need development, and it opens up new connections. So talking about the brain does give you a novelty effect, but it's something much more than that. The second reason I find the brain is very effective as a way of creating change is that when you're trying to get people to see something, basically the word see is the key. The tangible is so much easier to see. The tangible is something you can access in your mind. If I say see an elephant, you can see an elephant. If I say see cognitive dissonance, you go, what? But if I say see a region of the brain taking all the oxygen and glucose from all these other regions, and your prefrontal cortex suddenly has very little resources to do much, you can see that, right? And so then you can spot that coming. So the tangible is easier to see. It's a well understood fact. And so if you can speak in terms of physical aspects of biology, you get more buy-in because people get what you're saying more easily. The third reason is an important one. We get to improve our theories, and theories create the world. It says where Earl gets his ideas. An executive having a shower to come up with ideas. Has anyone noticed that you have these great insights in the shower, these kind of big ideas? Have you noticed you have them maybe when you're swimming, doing laps? Well, it's not the water. But many people make that false correlation and many other false correlations because we don't have the science to understand the theories. It turns out great ideas actually come, and we've only just learnt this in the last couple of years, great ideas come when you're able to notice subtle signals. that things like happiness improve that and other things improve that, but it's being able to see subtle signals that actually facilitates great ideas from a brain perspective. So we get to improve our theories by getting in and studying the brain directly. And I'm going to give you some examples of some of the surprises that are coming out of the enormous body of neuroscience. And there are about 50,000 practicing neuroscientists right now, so it's an enormous field. One of the big surprises is how limited our attention is. And it comes back to how small and fragile the prefrontal cortex is. Some of you are probably noticing that now. You're thinking about lunch and other things and finding it hard to focus. Some of you are distracted trying to work out what my accent is. It's half American, half Australian, so just to confuse everyone. But our attention is very limited, and it's biological. And really, we do a very small amount of quality thinking per day, and we need to treat that as an asset. There's a huge amount of research in there, and quite surprising how limited it is. The second big surprise is how wrong we get emotions, okay? And there's some cultural things here, but it seems to be fairly universal. When people are asked what will happen if they speak about emotions, people say that it will make those emotions worse. Would you agree with that? So what we do is we don't tend to speak about emotions. We tend to kind of try to suppress them, try to bottle them up. Actually, there's a very good body of research saying that if you've got some emotional arousal, speaking about those emotions in simple terms reduces them significantly. Okay, but even after people have seen those studies, it takes some practice to experience it, for people to actually try it. Because we've been wired to think we shouldn't speak about emotions. Actually, speaking about them reduces the effects of them. So what do we do instead? If we're not speaking about them, what do? We suppress. And we think suppression is a great idea. This is where the neuroscience comes in. If you try to suppress an emotion, your limbic system stays at the same level of arousal or gets worse. And that level of arousal takes away resources from your cognitive functions. So suppressing emotions makes you basically less smart. It also, funnily enough, it kind of kills your memory. If you're trying to suppress a feeling, you won't remember what someone else is telling you, which explains an enormous amount of conflicts in life and at home and everywhere. The third thing is when you suppress emotions, other people's blood pressure goes up. It actually creates a threat response in other people, which is quite surprising. So we get these things wrong, and as a result, we've built these theories and models and frameworks that actually work against the way our biology really functions. And just like we thought the Earth was flat once and now we know it's not, the science and technology can catch up and make quite a change in our society. And this is a final thing on emotions. This is a summary of a study of about 500 people, and they were able to categorize people into whether they suppressed emotions when emotions hit or reappraised emotions, which is a fantastic strategy. But reappraisal is difficult. It requires a lot of cognitive resources. You have to look at a situation and look at it from a whole other perspective. Something that happens at a TED conference. Reappraisal, for example, might be you're having an argument with someone and you actually manage to see the situation from their perspective. You know how hard that is if you're upset? It just feels physically impossible. So we divided people into two groups, those who suppressed more, those who reappraised more. The people who suppressed more were dramatically below the average on all these factors. People who reappraised more were above. Now, here's one of the really interesting kickers. Most of the emotional situations we all deal with every day are internal. They're made up fears, anxieties, concerns. I thought about the fact of, do you have my right or wrong slides at least 30 times in the last, 24 hours. And it takes up, space. So these internal kind of threats, the more you know about your brain, the more you can say to yourself, oh, that's just my brain doing something crazy. And you become someone who actually reappraises much more about yourself. I was in Chicago last week talking to someone from a large organization, and she was kind of laughing at herself, and I caught her sort of laughing at her own experience, and she apologized. And I said, oh, no. Actually, that's wonderful. And some of the healthiest people are people who are able to observe and laugh at themselves. By the way, humor is one of the cheapest and most wonderful forms of reappraisal. It takes less resources. So we get emotions wrong. We don't speak about them. We try to suppress thinking that is the best thing to do. When it comes to working with other people, actually it has some surprising consequences. The third set of surprises is probably one of the most kind of significant. And it sort of links to some of the things Barry Schwartz was saying earlier, a very inspiring session. We've completely misunderstood how important the social world is. You know, that list of job descriptions. We don't see how social the brain is. Huge amounts of the brain are dedicated to social interaction because we don't survive without the social world for the first 10, 12 years of our life. So just like a wolf has incredible sense of smell, we have incredible sense of exactly what's going on in the social world. It's quite surprising. And what we're discovering about the social world is that it's as important as the physical world from the brain's perspective. So in the brain, if you sense there's a threat to your life, you'll react very intensely. But also if you sense a threat to, say, your status, okay, which is your perception in terms of other people, you'll also react as if your life is threatened, which is why when someone says to you, can I give you some feedback, we all go, oh my gosh, and the stomach starts, you know, how uncomfortable that is. And it explains the terrible challenges of performance reviews in organizations. So the brain is intensely social, and we only really can find that out by doing studies and putting studies together. And we see that the same brain network for feeling physical pain is used for feeling social pain. Here's a kind of quirky, unexpected outcome of that. If you're feeling ostracized and people are attacking you, take a Tylenol. The pain actually, social pain actually reduces. It's been studied in controlled studies. So the social pain, and these are 5 elements of social pain that I've been able to weave together. The social pain or social pleasures are actually the brain's own goals. When we set goals for people, like a promotion or this or that, what we do is we assimilate these into the brain's own goals. And the brain has goals basically to feel good, to move towards reward, which is a dopamine release, to stay away from threat, which is a cortisol release, etc. So the brain wants to feel like we're always getting better, to feel like we understand what's going on, to be certain, to feel like we have the choices, to be autonomous, to feel connected safely with others, and to feel like things are fair. Now, what happens in organizations is many managers accidentally do all the wrong things. They tell people what they should be doing differently. They don't provide clear expectations. They don't let people make choices. They don't trust people or open up, and they treat people unfairly. And you get this kind of jackpot of threat that literally makes people less smart. But you can use these as motivators. There's a study showing that just saying good job to someone was activating the same kind of reward circuitry at the same level as a financial reward. That just a sense of fairness and an increase in fairness was also activating a deep social reward, which is why putting social justice programs into organizations kind of makes people feel rewarded. So understanding the brain's own drivers, I think, is an extremely important objective if we're going to improve our society as a whole. And this is a framework that summarizes hundreds and hundreds of papers into something that you can kind of see. It's a scarf, you can see it, or for the Americans, it's scarf. Okay. But you can see it so you can remember it easily, and then you can notice, oh, look at that, I've just threatened that person's status. That's why they're kind of talking all crazy, and I should maybe just bring this down a bit. So these are some of the surprises about the brain. That our attention is very limited. We get wrong how emotions work. We've really misunderstood the social world and how important it is. And the final one is that attention itself creates change in the brain. Is that when you focus your attention on any particular aspect of experience, you either embed or create circuits. And this has a lot of implications if you're trying to create change. You really want to think about, where are you focusing attention on what, the past or the future? Where are you going? So it requires us to be more reflective, to actually notice, what we're doing with our attention. So there's an enormous amount more. It's quite funny talking about the most complex thing in the known universe in 12 minutes, but I think I'm almost at 13. But my fourth reason I think is the most profound and most important. The fourth reason why teaching about the brain or learning about the brain in organizations, in schools, and even in relationships. The fourth reason is it's so helpful. It's quite a deep one. When you understand your brain a bit more, you're able to understand your experience and actually have more choices. You're able to catch certain things before they unfold. And there's a whole interesting timing about that. And ultimately what it does is it actually creates a type of mindfulness. You're becoming an observer of your behavior, just like this woman in Chicago. You're becoming someone who can observe and stand aside. That makes you more reflective. It also, surprisingly, is one of the few things that makes people more empathic and more caring. I had dinner last week with one of the founders of the mindfulness movement, a very important figure, Daniel Siegel, and he was sitting with the Dalai Lama recently. He told me the story. It's a third-hand story, but it really hit me. And the Dalai Lama was saying, we've kind of failed in religion to create a really compassionate, empathic life for many, many people. And he said, I hope that science can go a little bit further, perhaps into kind of the ivory towers, perhaps, to create greater mindfulness and therefore greater empathy. And I want to leave you with a challenge from Theodore Zeldin, a philosopher. When will we make the same breakthroughs in the way we relate to each other as we've made in technology? I love these technology breakthroughs. This is awesome. I absolutely love it, and I want to spend hours talking about it. But we've hardly made any improvements in how we relate to each other in 30, 50, 100 years. And I think it's time to put some focus on that and really make a difference there. Thank you very much.